Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 23rd of February, 2026, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin with me in the studio.
Delighted to be here, Brian.
I know, it's a great one. We're also delighted to have Liz Evans joining us today. Now, a huge amount happening in the world. We've packed UK column news. How do we cover everything? Well, of course, we can't. So we have to pick out what we think people should be paying attention to. And we're going to be having a look at Ukraine, obviously, as the war moves on. We're going to have a look at what's happening around Epstein, which we think is very, very important. Liz Evans is going to be having a look at all of the events around gender reassignment, medication, and really excellent pushback by some nursing staff. And Ben, you're on the subject of what's really taking place under the surface. So manipulation of UK, left-right divide, reforming Britain and the communities, and political power couples, plus the Indian AI summit. Now, we will have a special extra for our UK column members today. We're going to be talking about serious things, and we're also going to be talking about we'll be talking about serious things, and we'll also be bringing in some light-hearted stuff. So let's just move on, and we'll get straight into the horrors of the Ukraine war. So I make no apologies for this, because the conflict now moving into the fifth year. Oh, what a lovely war. Millions dead and wounded, and of course mentally damaged. This is something that often gets overlooked, because we know in the United States, huge number of veterans suffering from PTSD and other mental health problems. Now, Britain loves this war because, of course, it is about regime change, or at least trying to get regime change in Russia. And here's the LBC headline that we can just magic up another 500 million in new defence missiles and systems. That's just been announced. But of course, we're cash strapped. But if it's money for the war, no problem at all. Now, who's created the war? Well, many people would look at Boris Johnson. Here's the BBC headline. UK should send non-combat troops to Ukraine now. That's what Johnson's been telling the BBC. But in this amazing exchange, even I describe her as the BBC's ice queen, Laura Kuenssberg, looks nonplussed. Let's have a look at Boris Johnson in this interview. Quite incredible.
If it's not, then it's up to the Ukrainians.
Do we think we just had a little bit of a technical issue with that one? Will it play? Let's see.
If we're going to have a plan for boots on the ground, I may be going in advance of a lot of thinking in the UK at the moment. But if we're going to have a plan for boots on the ground after the war, after Putin has condescended to have a ceasefire, then why not do it now? Just to make this point that it is up to the Ukrainians. I mean, these people wouldn't be there in a war-fighting capacity, right?
To be clear, you're saying that right now that UK military forces and from other European countries should go to Ukraine, to safe parts of Ukraine, to make a statement, to flip that switch, as you've said, in Vladimir Putin's head, showing intent.
Yes, I think we're willing to do it in the context of a ceasefire, which of course puts all the initiative, all the power in Putin's hands. Why not do it now? There's no logical reason that I can see why we shouldn't send some peaceful ground forces there to show our support, our constitutional support for a free, independent Ukraine. That this is a political thing. It's about whether Ukraine is a free country or not. If it's a vassal state of Russia, which is what Putin wants, then obviously it's up to Putin to decide who comes to his country. If it's not, then it's up to the Ukrainians.
So disgusting figure, Ben, the idea that anybody would die for Boris Johnson, just incredible. And of course, he's saying that these would be non-combat troops, but the reality is all Western troops anywhere near Ukraine are working to help the Ukrainians. Therefore, they're inherently in the battle, but quite disgusting. Now, alongside him, former Chief of Defence Staff, Admiral Radakin, let's just go back in time and have a look at what Admiral Radakin had to say to the country when he was in post. This is June 2022.
Effectiveness.
We seem to be having a...
Ukraine has shown how courageous it really is, and Russia has vulnerabilities because it's running out of people, it's running out of high-tech missiles, and if you just look at where Russia is at the moment, it's lost about 25% of its combat land effectiveness.
So there was Admiral Radakin claiming that the Russians were losing back in 2022. They'd lost their combat effectiveness. They couldn't produce weapons. All of it absolute nonsense. And, well, surprisingly, no better place to go than the BBC and Verify to have a look at what nonsense was coming out of his mouth, because here's Verify saying that Russian attacks on Ukraine have doubled since the Trump inauguration. But what the BBC doesn't tell its audience is that Russia can attack any target anywhere in Ukraine at any time. That is a key thing. And if we have a look at analysis by Al Jazeera here, on the left-hand side, you've got strikes up to 900 at the top. And then we're looking through months in 2025, and you can see the huge and growing number of Russian strikes. And if you don't believe that, well, we can go to the BBC here, where it shows their own data, where 6,000 is the top line. And you can see the increase since Trump took power. Now, if we go to other places with good analytical research on the internet, obviously we have to abandon mainstream media. This diagram here is one of many showing flight paths of Russian drone attacks into Ukraine. And we can see just how many missiles have been launched and how this is causing a huge problem for Ukraine. I'll just say to our audience, regret that we seem to be having a technical problem. We're just going to freeze the news for a few moments while we try and sort that out. So, Chris, if you can just deselect us, we'll see whether we can fix the problem. Have you got the technical banner? Okay, all right, we'll try and through. So to our audience, apologies. We will try and move through. We think we've got the bug fixed, but very interesting. This should happen to a day of all days. Now, if we just come back to those two Right Honourable, I think they might have been called in the time, men. Boris Johnson, I'm going to label as a dangerous madman, but the interesting thing is he's got a puppy with him. And of course, equally dangerous, the military simply following along the lead from our politicians. Now, let's just have a little look at what Zelensky has had to say recently.
Some people, I think including President Trump, say Ukraine cannot win this war. Are they correct?
Where are you now? Today you're in Kyiv. You're in the capital of our homeland. You are in Ukraine. I'm grateful for this. Will we lose? Of course not, because we are fighting for Ukraine's independence.
So if you can win this war, and I know you've said that, what does victory look like?
Today we speak about stopping this war. I believe that stopping Putin today and preventing him from occupying Ukraine is a victory for the whole world, because Putin will not stop at Ukraine.
You're not saying that victory means getting all the land back, are you?
In any case, we will achieve that. That is absolutely clear. It's only a matter of time. To do it today would mean losing a huge number of people, millions of people, because the Russian army is large. and we understand the cost of such steps. We would not have enough people. We would be losing them. And what is land without people? Honestly, nothing. And we also do not have a sufficient amount of weapons. That depends not only on us, but on our partners. As of today, this is not available. But returning to the just borders of 1991 is without a doubt a victory for justice.
Because you know the argument is that people make is that you don't have enough troops, that you are dependent on foreigners for weapons, and therefore you are actually in a vulnerable position. And sometimes President Trump has exploited that.
We are vulnerable in this position, that is true. Today the issue is air defense. This is the most difficult problem. Unfortunately, our partners still do not grant licenses for us to produce systems ourselves. For example, Patriot systems, or even missiles for the systems we already have.
Why won't they do that?
I don't know. I have no answer.
So Zelensky doesn't know. He's prosecuting the war. He's run out of people because he's on about his third army. The rest of them are dead or injured or damaged. And it's very clear he is not winning the war, but the West doesn't want to admit it because it's driving for regime change. Is Russia winning? Well, of course, the BBC would have us believe no, because the forward motion on the ground is very slow. However, that is only part of the Russian tactics. Let's have a look at data which has come from the Ukrainians themselves, and we'll make it easier to see. 63,000 energy facilities in Ukraine damaged between February 22 and April 2025. So imagine what the economic performance of the country is. It's devastated. And contrary to the reports of the BBC and Admiral Radakin retired, the Russians are certainly not running out of bombs or missiles. They're outproducing the West and the States. Now, here's an irony. We've got Green Agenda Ukraine from May 2025, the National Comprehensive Green Transition Assessment Report for Ukraine. And if I just read a little bit of it, it says, prior to the Russian full-scale invasion, industry was the largest energy consumer in Ukraine, 33% of the final energy consumption. However, due to the ongoing war, large-scale destruction of infrastructure and additional facilities, this proportion has changed. To right it has, because from being an electricity exporter with the seventh largest power generation capacity in Europe, Ukraine has turned into an electricity importer. And if I had a bit more, military occupation of energy objects and physical destruction of energy infrastructure are significant impacts. 50% of the energy generation capacity is in Ukraine. In Ukraine is located in the currently occupied territories, and Russian attacks on energy infrastructure in the first half of 2024 alone destroyed about 50% of the capacity. So this is the reality, and of course Western media refuses to talk about this because it is the evidence for stopping the war. Now I'm going to just say, Ben, in a minute, you're going to be looking at what's happening in UK, which is basically, while all of this goes on and occupies media, the media in UK, we've got a complete reorganisation, effectively, of politics and society. But before I get there, let's just say this, that basically the BBC's now got very, very cynical in that they are trying to lever extra people into fighting in Ukraine. Let's have a look at this latest from the BBC. In the army now, pictures that show how ordinary Ukrainians have been shaped by war. So nothing about the slaughter. This is about really how good the war is. And true to the BBC, they're aiming for young women because basically these reports are making out that young women getting involved in the Ukrainian forces, it's a good thing. And on the right, they particularly focus on Anastasia, who has become an FPV, a first-person view operator. That's a drone operator. So this is another report which has come in from the Russians, but it's talking about the real destruction of an enemy, a Ukrainian drone control point, and that has been taken out with a very large 122 millimeter artillery. So I'm just going to play this video and talk you through it a bit. But essentially, this is actually showing what's happening on the battlefield from the fact that drones see everything. This is destruction of Ukrainian infrastructure. Here we've got an overview of one of the many smaller towns, very flat. The drones see everything, and the explosions are where highly accurate attacks are taking out anything from defensive strong points to the position of drone operators, because of course if the drone operators are taken out, then the rest of the action on the battlefield can continue without being closely monitored. You can see the scale of the explosions here. This clip is showing more drones attacking armor. This is being done by both sides with enormous casualties. But I'm also going to take you on to consider what the effect of this sort of warfare on the drone operators is. And if we do a little bit of research on the internet, and I did use some AI to help me with this, but these are the basic statistics that for drone operators, be it men or young women, you're talking about 2 to 5% with PTSD, 4.3 moderate to severe PTSD from another study, and between 11 and 20% with high emotional exhaustion. So the thing is here that basically the BBC is just so keen to get these young women onto the battlefield. And meanwhile, here in UK, our Ministry of Defence announcing that they've partnered with the Department of Work and Pensions in order to get more young people involved in the military and drones. And here we've got 2 women that are driving this agenda. So a little bit of a interrupted delivery on the subject of Ukraine, but really, really bad. We're now pumping more money in to keep this fight going, and of course the casualties vast, and the BBC would have more young people, men and women, dying on the battlefield. Boris Johnson, he wants that war to continue. Ben, it's outrageous, but of course, whilst this is occupying the minds of many people, we've got another attack going on, which is of UK politics and society.
Indeed we do.
I'll just move on through here.
Indeed we do.
See. We're having an interesting day.
We certainly are. Yeah, so I talked last week about divide and rule. This is how they get away with this stuff, by the way. So if we're all in warring factions in the country, then we can't coordinate with each other in order to get rid of the corrupt regime that keeps on dragging us into these conflicts overseas and looting the treasury for fake pandemics and all of these things that are going on around us. And these were the 2 parameters I talked about, the left and the right. So on the right-hand side, again, this sort of relates to the political parties, right, to the right wing and the left wing. On the right-hand side, obviously, you've got the Tories, more recently Reform, even more recently Restore Britain. On the left, you've got Labour and more recently the Green Party. And these things are being aggressively promoted and embedded down into the society so that we are divided from each other and can be more effectively ruled. I will talk more about this a lot as we go through the year, but today I'm going to focus particularly on the rule bit, the bit in the middle. What's happening above and around these 2 divisions, because there are things up there that are going on. And there's this organisation that popped up back in 2019 called Together, which was founded by Justin Welby, former Archbishop of Canterbury, who, as regular viewers will be aware, had to resign last year in absolute disgrace for covering up child abuse issues. He founded this organisation alongside Brendan Cox, who, amongst many other things, is a young global leader of the World Economic Forum. So this is a central control function hovering above society, which has an extraordinary remit that it's set for itself. It calls itself one of the most powerful and diverse coalitions ever assembled in the UK. It evolved from dozens of separate conversations across the country about the need for a single united group committed to action on social cohesion, building stronger communities. They bring together hundreds of partners, including some of the nation's best loved and best known brands. Important, there's a lot of corporate money in here, to build what they call a kinder, closer and more connected society. Doesn't that sound fantastic? We'll put a link, go and have a look at their website. We could quite literally sit here, as I said, there are hundreds of organisations involved in this. We could sit here all week talking about Together and the network that has sprung up around it. But suffice to say, they are extremely influential. And they are very interested in the social, economic, political transformation of the country in line with the World Economic Forum agenda. Obviously, Brendan Cox is operating essentially as a proxy for Klaus Schwab et al. And the new leadership team at the World Economic Forum in his position as a young global leader. More recently, so as I said, this launched in 2019. They've been active, and last year they established a partner organisation, which is basically the same thing, right? They present themselves as separate, but together operates as what they describe the secretariat to a commission, which is the Independent Commission on Community and Cohesion, which itself is overseen by Sir Sajid Javid, should I say, or Sir Savage Jabhead, I think was his name during COVID, former Tory minister, and then also John Cruddas, who is the former Labour MP for Dagenham, which itself has been a test case for the social and economic and political transformation of the country, one of those inner London boroughs that has been deliberately destroyed and reformed over the past 20 plus years as a test case for what they're going to roll out across the rest of the society. So the Independent Commission, again, has an extraordinary remit. It describes itself as a once-in-a-generation commission on the future of our communities. They've given themselves a big brief. It's got some extraordinary people on its advisory council, including top left. It's slightly obscured for viewers, but we can see David Halpin, CBE, from the Behavioural Insights team. You've got a guy there on the right-hand side, Sundar Katwala, who is Director of British Future and was also the General Secretary of the Fabian Society for 10 years, right? So this is absolutely Fabian socialist, Labour establishment. Caroline Lucas is in there. She was the head of the Green Party until Zach Polanski took it over last year. Laura Marks, CBE, formerly of the Board of Deputies, the most senior council of Jews in the country. Lord Mendelsohn, former Labour peer, was the guy involved in the dodgy donor scandals back in the Blair era, and that's probably over 25 years ago now. It's amazing how these people hang around, as well as some sort of establishment Tory types as well. So you've got Tim Montgomery from Conservative Home, Fraser Nelson from The Spectator, and Lord Woolley, definitely not a Tory, but Lord Woolley from Woodford. So quite an extraordinary mix of people. And what they're doing is gathering information together to get an understanding of what's going on in the country, building what they call a national conversation through research, which is going to happen through this year, started in June last year, going to run through to autumn 2026, which will then be enacted in some fashion. So from autumn onwards, so September, October time this year, there is an intention to implement and impact through some non-specified action. We don't know what it's going to be. But we've got these two forces driving society apart. And then in the centre, kind of behind the scenes at the moment, we've got these integrated groups of political, economic and cultural leaders who are conspiring with each other, quite frankly, to gain a deeper understanding of the issues in the country as they see it anyway, so that they can prescribe some kinds of solutions to drive everyone back together into the centre. Quite an amazing coalition. We'll be talking a lot more about this because we've only really just scratched the surface on it today. But I mean, just the names that we've reeled off there alone are quite staggering, I would say. And
of course, war and rumours of war is brilliant for occupying people's minds while this goes on under the surface, out of sight of most. So it's hidden in plain sight, but most people can't see it.
Yeah, exactly. And I will just say, this together word keeps on cropping up because people watching UK Colin will probably be familiar with the Together Declaration on the right-hand side. I'm not saying that Together Declaration is coordinating with these people, by the way, but I just think it's interesting that this word is coming up again and again. Together declaration on the right-hand side, together in the centre, and then also, interestingly, on the left, politically, as well as on the left-hand side of this chart, we've got this thing called the Together Alliance, which is a massive anti-fascist type organisation, which is running a huge march coming up in London on the 28th of March this year. And in the mix of all of this, you get a sense that they're really going to try and do something.
Yeah.
Something significant.
We'll stay posted. Thank you, Ben. Let's welcome Liz Evans to today's news. Liz, hello. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, you're going to be having a look at gender issues. You've got some good news in this report as well. So what have you got for us?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on. So I've prepared a report on the NHS and the multiple stories documenting its descent into gender confusion, bordering on madness, and exemplified by this headline, which nearly made me choke on my breakfast this morning. No, the one before that, that's the one. King's College Hospital, who are a key player in a story I'm going to cover later, actually train staff on how to identify what their pronouns are. A health service that doesn't understand basic human biology is very concerning. And this obsession with pronouns and gender ideology is not limited to staff. And the Daily Skeptic reported in January on Epic, which is a £450 million patient record system introduced into about 10 NHS trusts. Now, Epic's default setting forces midwives to record the pronouns, sex assigned at birth, gender identity, and sexual orientation of any newborn baby registered on the system. But there's no option to record their biological sex. And disturbingly, it also requires midwives to record the organs present at birth, organs surgically enhanced or constructed, and organs hormonally enhanced. Strange. So who's behind Epic? Well, Epic Systems was founded in 1979 by a computer programmer called Judy Faulkner in a Wisconsin basement. And Faulkner, the CEO, is now worth nearly $8 billion. And there's her Forbes page. And their revenue comes from software licensing and maintenance fees from large healthcare providers. And major implementations like the NHS cost over $650 million. And there will be annual maintenance fees in the millions. And according to research firm Sacra, Epic has a 33% market share of US hospital beds in the electronic health records market. And they hold patient records for an astonishing 325 million people, generating $5.7 billion in 2024 alone. So moving back to the NHS, gender ideology reared its ugly head again at the end of November with the announcement of an NHS-backed experimental trial of puberty blockers on more than 200 children aged between 10 and 15. The Pathways trial is funded by a partnership called between NHS England and the National Institute for Health and Care Research called the National Research Collaboration Programme, at an estimated cost of nearly £11 million. This Pathways trial is being held at King's College, London. We mentioned them earlier, to, quotes, explore how puberty-suppressing hormones impact the physical, social, and emotional well-being of young people with gender incongruence. They admit that the benefits and risks of this treatment are not yet known, yet they appear happy to use vulnerable, gender-confused children as guinea pigs in a dystopian experiment, risking their fertility, sexual function, physical, mental, and cognitive health in complete violation of the central tenet of medicine to first do no harm. And every child in the trial will get puberty blockers. So the treatment group, we've got a slide on this, gets puberty blockers for 2 years, while the control group is given the drugs after a 1-year delay, making a mockery of the claim to be a randomized control trial, as the control group for the long-term safety data is lost after a year. Then researchers admit that some participants may remain on the drugs beyond the trial if deemed clinically appropriate. Disturbingly, those aged 12 years or over will be questioned about their sexual experience and activities and advised to use effective contraception during the trial. But despite this, the Pathways website boasts that their trial has been checked by the MHRA and has ethics committee approval. And the Department of Health and Social Care claim there are robust safeguards in place to protect young people's well-being. Well, I'm not so sure about that, because last week it was revealed that children on the Pathways trial will be incentivised with up to £500 worth of Love to Shop vouchers for completing psychometric tests and scans. And these participants will receive £30 vouchers for each of the 15 cognitive assessments completed and £15 for each of the 3 MRI scans. This has caused widespread outrage, including from the Shadow Equalities Minister, Claire Coutinho, who said these children are in a vulnerable position. Adults should not be giving them vouchers in return for being experimented on. No kidding. Now, you'll remember the 2024 CAS review, which found poor evidence, very poor evidence, for either the safety or efficacy of puberty blockers, but found serious short and long-term side effect evidence. And there's also no evidence that transitioning will reduce suicide risk, which is often cited as a reason to use these powerful sterilizing drugs. Dr. Cass ruled that gender-questioning children must be protected from irreversible and damaging medical or surgical treatment. And following the publication of her report, Wes Streeting banned puberty blockers indefinitely for under 18s due to the, quotes, unacceptable safety risks. Unfortunately, but probably deliberately, Cass left a dangerous loophole, allowing children to receive puberty blockers if enrolled in a trial. And notably, Hilary Cass has welcomed the Pathways trial. And this loophole has been predictably exploited by gender ideologues to continue their Frankenstein agenda, which has been described in the media as state-sponsored child abuse. Public figures such as Kemi Badenoch and J.K. Rowling have called for the trial to be halted. And Health Secretary Wes Streeting admitted that parents of children in the trial cannot give proper informed consent for the use of drugs with such serious and irreversible side effects, which includes infertility and no evidence of benefit. So the public have joined in the fight back with a government petition to stop the trial reaching 142,000 signatures, which has secured a debate in Parliament on the 9th of March. Now, the government response deferred to the experts, citing the CAS review recommendation to establish a clinical trial. And then in December, a legal challenge to halt the Pathways trial began, spearheaded by the Bayswater Support Group, who represent 800 parents of gender-confused children, and supported by psychotherapist James Esses and former trans patient Kira Bell, who received puberty blockers and male hormones herself, but later regretted her transition and detransitioned. They sent a letter before action to the MHRA, who licensed the trial, and the Health Research Authority, who gave ethics approval, claiming that the ethical approval process had been seriously flawed and threatening a judicial review unless the trial was halted. Then at the beginning of February, so just a couple of weeks ago, the Bayswater Group launched their judicial review against the Health Research Authority and the Department of Health and Social Care, applying to the High Court to challenge the decision to start the trial and asking for recruitment to be paused during the legal proceedings. Now, a King's College spokesman said, "We strongly refute the claim that this carefully designed study is scientifically unsound or that it bypassed the ethics process. However, it looks like this legal case is already bearing fruit." So firstly, in Northern Ireland last week, Health Minister Mike Nesbitt very unexpectedly suspended participation in the Pathways trial, only days after Northern Ireland had confirmed their inclusion. He cited the ongoing legal action, saying, "I think it is prudent to pause and wait on the results of the judicial review." And he came under intense fire from many, including First Minister Michelle O'Neill, who described his decision as disgraceful. But it turns out to have been a prescient action, as only days later we got this bombshell news which broke this weekend. On Friday, the 20th of February, the Department of Health and Social Care announced that the Pathways trial has been paused due to new concerns raised by the MHRA. And the MHRA's statement on the government website explains that they are taking a cautious approach, and due to new concerns around participant well-being, they will engage in scientific dialogue with the trial sponsor, King's College. Then the plot thickened with a link on the MHR statement to this redacted confidential letter from the MHRA to King's, which is well worth a read. This slide has just got a few excerpts. Briefly, the MHRA referred to the public and professional interest in the trial, the significant and unquantified risk of long-term biological harm, including infertility, and the need to implement a minimum age restriction of 14 years. Remember, it was anything from 8 to 10 years. And they also list serious adverse effects that need to be monitored for, including bone thinning, vertebral or low velocity fractures, persistent vaginal bleeding, and reduced cognitive function. And just remember, these are healthy children we're talking about. And at the end of their letter, they also refer to the legal action which must have put the wind up them. And this is a significant victory for the public. But this is the same MHRA who have still failed to respond or react to the horrific yellow card data of COVID vaccine injury and death. Why the deafening silence in that case? But it seems that this NHS gender insanity may have peaked with several recent significant victories. So after a long legal fight, the Darlington nurses finally won their employment tribunal against the County Durham and Darlington NHS Trust. The trust was ruled to have violated the nurse's dignity by allowing Rose Henderson, a biological male who identifies as a woman, to use the female changing room. And the tribunal concluded that while a transgender person has protections against discrimination and harassment, this does not translate into a positive right to use the female changing room. And they cited the 2025 Supreme Court ruling that according to the 2010 Equality Act, a woman is defined by her biological sex and not her identity. But it's just been revealed that, astonishingly, the Trust chief executive submitted a report to the board admitting that the Trust had spent £603,000 worth of taxpayers' money fighting this case. And then finally, last bit of good news, at the end of January, after 18-month battle, a nurse suspended by Epsom and St Heliers NHS Trust for misgendering a male patient in May 2024 was cleared by her Trust disciplinary panel and reinstated to clinical duties. And we have a video of her telling her incredible story.
Yes, I'm still traumatized with the situation. The fact that I could be facing suspension, my career coming to an end, simply because I refused to refer to this patient as a female, as a she or miss. Yes, on the medical record, this was a male patient under urology. On the bedside, it was just written his name, not miss or anything. So on the first glance, when I looked at him, I was like, wow. He was a very big man, very huge, about 6 foot tall. He literally stood up and began to throw racial slurs at me and said, "Do not call me mister. I'm a miss. I'm a woman." When I came back the following shift, I was told you can't work anywhere else. From now on, you can't do bank shifts. You're restricted from doing anything from HR point of view because you have deliberately misgendered a patient. I was in shock.
And finally, Mele is not leaving the matter there. She's going to take the trust to an employment tribunal in April on the grounds of discrimination due to her Christian and gender critical beliefs. So, supported by Christian Concern, she is suing the trust for harassment, discrimination and breaches of her human rights. And you can go to the Christian Concern website for updates and a link to donate to her legal case. But this shows the power of people fighting back.
Liz, thank you very much for that excellent report, and really good that you end on a positive note there. What does it show? It shows that each individual can actually step up and challenge the system that brings help alongside them, and they can make a difference. So really wonderful to see that very brave lady basically coming out on top in this in this fight. So
it shows that Christian African women are kryptonite to the identity politics brigade as well.
Indeed. Okay, so Liz, thank you for that. The other thing that was in my head was that the number of people with a gender problem is still a statistic very low. What is it? It's about 0.5%, if that, because very little data on it. So we come to the question of where do these policies come from, that we've gone from dealing with people with problems in a human and caring way, but not making that the driving agenda which affects the overwhelming majority of society. I think you're going to take a delve into, not on that particular issue, but some of the people who are manipulating policy in this country.
Yeah, where the policy's coming from. Yeah, we got a new power couple in the British political and economic establishment, and it all centres around this lady. This is Dame Antonia Romeo, who was mentioned last week. She's just been installed as the new cabinet secretary and head of the civil service, first lady to do the job, God bless her. And before that, she was permanent secretary to the Home Office for under a year, and then before that, she spent 4 years permanent secretary to the Ministry of Justice, career civil servant, diplomat, and clearly quite close with Shabana Mahmood, because she was at Justice with her and then went to the Home Office, and she's been bumped up into the top job in the civil service on, I would imagine, a recommendation from our current Home Secretary, who, let's remind ourselves, when she was at Justice, her ultimate vision for that part of the criminal justice system was to achieve by means of AI and technology what Jeremy Bentham tried to do with his panopticon. That is, the eyes of the state can be on you at all times. Antonia Romeo was helping her deliver this agenda, and no doubt will be carrying that through into the rest of the civil service as well. Isn't she a lovely lady? And this is her fella, John Romeo, who we're going to talk a bit more about now, actually. I'm sure we'll talk about Dame Antonia a lot over coming months because of the elevated position she now has in government. But I just wanted to flag up a very interesting bit of information, which is her husband and partner, who is also the managing partner and head of private capital at Oliver Wyman, which is a global consulting business. Head of private capital basically means helping really, really rich people
Become
get
richer.
even richer. Yeah. He's also the CEO of the Oliver Wyman Forum, which I'll come back to in a moment, chair of something called the London Data Commission, which is really interesting, and we'll come back to that too, and also vice chair of RADA, and with links into a bunch of other people, including the Rothschild family, actually, which I'll come back to shortly. Now, just to establish what Oliver Wyman is and where it sits in the old hierarchy, he's the managing partner of Oliver Wyman, which is owned by Marsh, formerly known as Marsh & McLennan, which is a strategic partner of the World Economic Forum.
Just a coincidence, Ben, I'm sure.
Yes, it was an accident, actually. I think they accidentally signed up strategic partnership, which they have to pay for, and is also the top tier of partnership. And they're also a thought partner, which means that they set the agenda and they basically establish the direction for global corporations. We'll provide some links. You go and look at some of their stuff. One of the ones that jumped out at me was the idea that Gen Z would prefer to have an AI boss than a human boss. That's what they're promoting at the moment. Fascinating. Now, he's also, as I mentioned, the managing partner of the Oliver Wyman Forum, and he was quoted as saying there that the issues we address in the Oliver Wyman Forum are global, span industries, and involve the public and private sector. So this is inherently public-private partnership. He then goes on to say, we are here to make connections across data, people, and insights that create breakthroughs. We do that by building leadership communities to act on shared challenges. That sounds very common purposey, doesn't it?
It does.
And it's exactly what common purpose are up to. Anyway, let's hear Mr. Romeo talking about his thoughts on misinformation.
John Romeo, I'm the managing partner of the Oliver Wyman Forum. Misinformation risks eroding the whole fabric of society. We've seen countless examples of how misinformation can spread very, very quickly far and wide, and how it can be weaponized to suit certain people's purposes. One of the biggest areas of focus right now is how do we restore trust online? How do we get our news? Where do we get it from? How is it filtered? How do we begin to interpret that and act on it? Now, there's no silver bullet to solve all of this, but I think as public and private sector come together and have that real open debate, the path is likely some combination of regulatory change and a resetting and clearer industry norms so that providers of platforms can still make money, but that we can begin to eliminate some of the more harmful impacts on society.
Well, I'm sure he doesn't like us, Ben. I'm sure he doesn't like UK column news. And
no.
According to him, we're to be eradicated. Is that right?
Filtered. We prefer the term filter, Brian. Come on, it
was a little bit strong.
Yeah, it was a little bit strong. Yeah, exactly. But he could basically work for Ofcom. I mean, he's sitting there and he's a managing partner of an international consulting firm, which is a strategic partner of the World Economic Forum. His wife is now the cabinet secretary, and he's basically saying this is what we think the government should be doing ultimately, right? So you get a sense of what he's about and essentially what ideas and information and policies are being directed straight into Cabinet Office, ultimately, through this relationship, right? And as I said, they're big on public-private partnerships. That's basically what the Oliver Wyman Forum has been set up to build, public-private partnerships. Great example of this, which I came across, one that Mr. Romeo is on the board of, is this. This is the London Data Commission, which was set up in 2020. And this is a partnership between Arup, who are also a World Economic Forum partner, Microsoft, who are also a World Economic Forum strategic partner. There's a theme emerging here, and Sadiq Khan, that lovely man who supposedly is the Mayor of London. And there are 4 pillars to this: leadership, responsibility, innovation, collaboration. I'll just whip through them quickly. You should go and have a read of this, because basically it's a blueprint for a smart city. That's what they're producing here. So we can see that this London Data Board is going to sit at the centre of the Greater London Authority, central government, London boroughs, academic institutions, private sector businesses, the NHS and emergency services, charities and NGOs, Transport for London. They're all going to feed into this central data platform, which is a public-private partnership that is then going to be used to coordinate policy across the capital city of the UK. Don't worry, though, they've got some principles that they use to govern their behaviour. Everything they do has got to deliver benefit for Londoners, drive innovation, protect privacy, share learning, create scalable solutions, be as open as possible. All sounds fantastic, doesn't it? They got a bunch of these pilot schemes running, a lot of it relating to COVID, so supporting London's response to COVID-19, identifying drivers for digital inclusion. So this is part of the COVID response, is making sure that everyone is on the internet as completely as possible, building digital neighbourhoods, expanding electronic vehicle charging infrastructure. These are all recommendations and actually active projects coming out of this thing that John Romeo has been coordinating on behalf of the Mayor and others. And this is going to sit at the epicentre of not just a national network, but a global network where the London Data Board is going to feed into the M8 group of metro mayors, the C40 cities, core cities, and then other international groups like the Bloomberg Cities Network. Right, so you thought that London was the capital of the UK. It's not. It's a hub in a global, interconnected digital network of city-states. And John Romeo is helping to coordinate that, the husband of the new cabinet secretary. Also, I did mention some links to the Rothschilds. This relates to this event that was held at Waddesdon Manor in Buckinghamshire at the end of 2023 about responsible investment. And this fella, who is a colleague, close colleague of John Romeo, Hugh Van Steenis, who's the vice chair of Oliver Wyman, so they're both in the leadership team at Oliver Wyman together, said that it was a pleasure to be part of the advisory group for the Responsible Investment Forum, a fabulous group of investors, financiers, business and policymakers convened by James Harding from Talks Media and Lord Rothschild. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't you about to say coincidence, but it's not coincidence.
Well, I was going to say that again, but when you say that too often, people realise that it can't be a coincidence.
No.
And indeed, it's not.
No, keep on seeing the same people. And just to wrap up on one final connection here, Mr. Romeo is also on the advisory board of RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. He's the chair of their development board, which I'm guessing is quite important. And who's the patron of RADA? It is none other than His Majesty King Charles III, who is hoping to pull the strings from behind the scenes, along with the rest of these characters that we just talked about, straight into Cabinet Office.
Indeed. Well, we'll have a little bit more to say about King Charles in a moment. But first of all, as always, a huge thank you to everybody supporting UK Column and our members. We can only do what we do with your financial support. So thank you very much for that. If we've got other people in UK or worldwide who'd like to join us to help, click on the blue button here on the UK Column website to support our work. That would be much appreciated. Now, as some people already know, because I can see in our chat box today that his name is being mentioned, but Patrick Henningsen has been in Mexico while some pretty amazing events have taken place. And we've got a short report from Patrick here. You can see more on his 21st Century Wire website. Let's have a look.
So again, we've spoken to locals here, and nobody has seen anything like this. People who have lived here for decades, including residents who were born here, native residents, saying this is a big issue. This is not something that they've ever encountered in their life. So again, this is completely a surprise, a shock to us. It's not something that we intended to be, reporting on. This is just something that's happened here. So as we're in the locale, I'm just reporting on it. I was here speaking at a conference. Anarchapulco 2026 on geopolitics and AI and propaganda. So again, this we've been immersed in all these political topics and panel discussions for the last week, and then our conference is finished this week, and then this happens. So it's incredible. What I'm going to do is I'll get a close-up look at this. This is a bus that was put here this morning, set on fire in order to block this main thoroughfare into the city. And you'll see these roadblocks at strategic points around the city, we're told. Police have been dispatched to different places. They're moving around, dealing with situations. There's been reports of people being pulled out of taxis, all their belongings taken, cars set on fire. This has to be seen as a power struggle. It's the best way to put it. Power struggle between local, state, federal authorities, and what many would call organized crime under the general term of the cartel. Various power outages, cell phone communication seems to be working at the moment, but it is a major sort of tumultuous event for the city of Puerto Vallarta in Mexico. I did a longer report, which is on the Sunday Wire at 21stcenturywire.com. We just went live just a few minutes ago.
Well, Ben, I'm not envious of the circumstances out there in Mexico. I am a little bit envious of the blue sky and sunshine that we could see in the background when you have a look out of the UK column window.
But we've got all the fog, though.
We've got all the cold, wet fog. Okay. Now, let's just move on to tonight at 7 o'clock. We've got another germ warfare episode, Lord of the Rings and the World's Central Banking Oligarchy. That's going to be really interesting and very pertinent because, of course, nothing moves in the world without the power of money. Now, we've also got a special video playing out tomorrow, which we're really going to encourage everybody to watch. This is going back in time well over 10 years ago, one of the UK column events when a lady called Strider gave an absolutely fantastic presentation about how the child abuse cover-up in Britain worked. Now, this was a really powerful and very, very extraordinary talk, and we think that it's so relevant today when many people are saying, how can Epstein have done what he did and then the thing just gets pushed into the long grass? Here's a little clip from her talking, but you will need to tune in tomorrow at 1 o'clock to see the full talk, and I think you will be amazed at what she had to say way back then. Let's have a little listen to this clip.
The headline, the PM dismissive of historic sex abuse claims, could, of course, mean that he is focusing on the present rather than the past. However, the subline is telling. He wants to move on from allegations of sexual abuse involving political figures.
Well, that's just a little snapshot, but do tune in tomorrow. We guarantee that once you've seen the talk that Strider gave, you'll really start to be able to put the Epstein affair in its proper place. Now, contrasting the work from that lovely lady, let's have a look at the BBC's reporting, because here we are. It's all to do with removing Andrew from the royal line of succession. This is all a part of the BBC drifting the whole of the Epstein affair into the royal long grass. We've got Andrew here. Well, he was a very naughty boy because he used, apparently, allegedly, taxpayers' money to pay for a massage. That's such a huge deal against the abuse that has now come to light around the Epstein affair. And then this one amused me because the BBC is saying, well, it's just a little bit of a battle between the royal brothers. It's Andrew versus King Charles. Now, of course, Andrew effectively looking over his shoulder because it's Epstein haunting him. But there's something the BBC doesn't want you to know or remember, and that, of course, is Jimmy Savile sitting over the shoulder of King Charles. So this isn't about a battle between royal brothers. This is about society, the government in UK, getting in amongst the powerful people in order to establish what crimes, if any, have been committed, who's responsible, and bringing those people to justice. Now, happily, if the mainstream media is not getting to grips with what's actually happening, we can go onto social media and find out quite a lot. But let's have a look at this report of this particular senator talking, and we should have a video clip to play with that. Hopefully, we have had our issues today. Okay, video 4 is what I'd like to pop up. Thank you.
Fire on them too. It's that simple.
Is that? Let's have another go at trying to play it.
It's that simple.
Why do you think he is working so hard not to get them released for so many months? What do you think the real reason is?
These files implicate billionaires and friends of his and political donors that he's trying to protect. And Epstein also had close ties to our own intelligence agencies and Israel's intelligence agencies. That's why there's so much effort in trying to stop this. And I do believe they'll try to stop it somewhere else. And that's going to backfire on them too. It's that simple.
So that was Senator Thomas Massie really getting down to the nitty-gritty of what's going on, and he's not frightened of speaking out. But of course, the mainstream media just not really picking up on this. But credit where it's due, The Economist has actually been delving into the files. So we pop this one up on screen, and they've been looking in detail at the data. And they've done some really, I think, effective analysis, which starts to build the picture about the relationships between people in the network around Epstein himself. Let's have a look at this little video clip.
Who had the most contact with Jeffrey Epstein during his final decade? At The Economist, we have analyzed 1.4 million of Jeffrey Epstein's emails. We found the 500 figures who appear most often and analyzed their relationships with the sex offender, building a picture of the people in consistent contact with Epstein after he pled guilty to soliciting sex from a minor. This is a list of some of the most well-known figures that appear in Epstein's emails. David Stern, an aide to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, Larry Summers, the former U.S. Treasury Secretary, and Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's associate who's been convicted of sex trafficking minors, were all in consistent contact with Epstein. Our data shows that some people were emailing with Epstein hundreds of times a month, like the physicist Lawrence Krauss and the banker Ariane de Rothschild. To understand just how much Epstein's network reached into almost every area of society, we've also divided the top 500 people by their industry. If you exclude Epstein's emails with his staff and business partners, 19% of messages with his top correspondents were with financiers, like Jess Staley, the former CEO of Barclays. 17% were in academia, like the immunologist Boris Nikolic. There were politicians like Peter Mandelson, Britain's former ambassador to the US, and Ehud Barak, Israel's former prime minister. And people from media and entertainment, including the publicist Peggy Siegel, the journalist Michael Wolff, and the filmmaker Woody Allen. The list also contains at least 18 current or former billionaires, including Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. All of them were in touch with Epstein after his plea admitting to sex offenses in 2008. Most of Epstein's correspondents say they didn't know about the scale of his crimes. In such a vast data dump, the quantity of emails alone doesn't give you the full picture of the nature of their relationships. So we mapped the number of emails sent and received. Ariane de Rothschild sent many more emails to Epstein than she received. Lawrence Krauss and Epstein sent similar numbers of emails to each other. Some people received far more emails than they sent, like Bill Gates, who was bombarded by messages between 2014 and 2016 and replied to relatively few. He was, however, happy to meet Epstein in person on a number of occasions. This analysis gives you an insight into Epstein's relationships and network after his plea deal, but many emails also detail the ongoing abuse of women and girls. We also used a large language model to score every message on how disturbing it is. And buried among 1 million mundane missives are over 1,000 that our LLM flagged as highly worrisome.
What's your take on that, Ben?
I think he's missed a few things out.
Go ahead.
So I would first of all like to understand the links between the Epstein files and the Bilderberg group, because Annie Minton-Beddoes, who is the editor-in-chief of The Economist, is on the steering committee of the Bilderberg Group alongside Peter Thiel, who was mentioned in that report, and they didn't really get into that. I wonder why. Also, The Economist is significantly owned and controlled by the Rothschild family and has been for decades. And also, Lorene Powell Jobs, I'm getting mixed up. I'm thinking about The Atlantic. That was me just riffing.
Okay.
But The Atlantic are in the mix here too, and they're not talking about this properly.
Okay.
That's controlled off. That's limited hangout. They're managing it.
Right. Well, we're just going to say some useful analysis by The Economist there. And of course, what does that data do, that little clip? It gets you thinking about what's actually happening. So I think our responses are indicative that it gets the grey cells moving. Let's come in a different direction from that analytical but rather dry Economist analysis. And we're going to go to a US comedian and commentator, David Feldman, who did a particularly good analysis of people around the Epstein affair, i.e. establishment people who should have been doing the right thing. Let's have a look at this first clip.
She was Florida's attorney general right when all of this was being exposed. So don't you think if Donald Trump had in any way been linked to Jeffrey Epstein, she would have prosecuted him? I mean, she's a lawyer. She's an officer of the court. 8 years as Florida Attorney General. She swore an oath on the Bible. You don't get to that position turning a blind eye to sexual predators. There's no way she would have turned a blind eye. Here she is running for re-election as Florida's Attorney General.
Florida ranks 3rd nationally in calls for help for human trafficking, where young women and children are enslaved and abused. I knew we needed all hands on deck. Businesses and hospitals to spot it, our great law enforcement to stop it, and tougher penalties to punish it. We're taking on Medicaid fraud, pill mills, gangs, and more. And I'll fight to put human trafficking monsters where they belong, behind bars.
Pam Bondi, our Attorney General.
She cleared Donald Trump. That should be enough. You would think, right? That would be enough. But that's not good enough for California House Democrat Ted Lieu, who sits on the House Oversight Committee. He accused Pam Bondi last week of committing perjury when she claimed there was nothing in the Epstein files implicating Donald Trump. He said she was committing perjury when she said under oath that there's no evidence, no documents even suggesting Donald Trump needed to be investigated. Watch how disrespectful my hero, Congressman Ted Lieu, is towards Pam Bondi. How dare Ted Lieu, who may be the best member of Congress, how dare he talk to Pam Bondi this way?
Now, before we play Ted Lieu speaking and asking his questions, we just say incredible blend of very dark humor and sarcasm, cutting right to the chase here. And it takes social media or broader new media to actually ask these key questions. So let's play clip 2 and have a look at what was actually said by Ted Lieu.
Former Prince Andrew, Donald Trump attended various parties with Jeffrey Epstein. I want to know, were there any underage girls at that party or at any party that Trump attended with Jeffrey Epstein?
This is so ridiculous, and that they are trying to deflect from all the great things Donald Trump has done. There is no evidence that Donald Trump has committed a crime. Everyone knows that. This has been the most transparent presidency. He's the one that asked that those files.
I'm going to claim my time. I got your answer. You said there's no evidence.
Trump asked
Mr. Chairman, please stop the clock.
The legislation. This is
Time
belongs to the gentleman from California.
Okay. I'm going to put up another document from a witness who called the FBI's National Threat Operations Center, because I believe you just lied under oath. There is ample evidence in the Epstein file.
Don't you ever accuse me of a crime.
I believe you just lied under oath, and this is all on videotape. You said there's no evidence of a crime. I'm showing you, here is a witness statement who called into the FBI's Threat Operations Center. He drove Donald Trump around in a limo. He overheard what Donald Trump said to Jeffrey on his cell phone. He was so angry, he was going to stop the limo and hurt Donald Trump. And he met a girl who said she was raped by Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. She later had her head blown off, and officers at the scene said that could not have been suicide. No one at the Department of Justice interviewed this witness. You need to interview this witness immediately. Epstein should rot in hell, so should the men who patronized his operation. And as we sit here today, there are over 1,000 sex trafficking victims, and you have not held a single man accountable. Shame on you. If you had any decency, you would resign right after this hearing concludes.
The gentleman has expired.
So a little bit of a hint there. I'm not taking sides in that discussion. I'm simply pointing out that actually the Epstein affair requires absolute clinical precision in looking into what actually happened and questioning why there's no full investigation. Now, compare that email on a really serious subject of abuse that they're talking about in that exchange. And I'll just bring in this one to get people thinking about this release. This is one note in the center console of a car, which simply says this: I used the cash to fill up the tank. And that note is marked confidential, and the name who's actually signed the little note has been redacted. So what do we learn from this? We have absolutely no idea what, if any, investigation was taking place. This is a photo from the Epstein files of a party with 2 female faces redacted. I don't believe those 2 women are particularly young. but we don't know. We can't see their faces. This is a man on grass. In front of him is a young child, redacted, and this is marked highly confidential. And then we've got an old photo of some young girls sitting on a sofa, also marked confidential. Now, I'm just going to add that as the Epstein long grass affair, kicked into the long grass affair, continues here in UK, we've got more reports, this from the BBC, about Fettes College failed to protect pupils from sexual and physical abuse. And we've got a Guardian report here on the Bishop of Lincoln arrested on suspicion of sexual assault. So, final reminder, have a look at the 1 o'clock report by Strider, and I think you will be astonished as to what she was saying all those years ago. Ben, we're very tight for time, but do you want to give our audience just a taster of matters India and AI?
India has become a hub for artificial intelligence, and essentially the way I see it is we're being colonised from India. It's colonisation in reverse, and Rishi Sunak's right at the heart of it.
Right.
There you go.
Okay.
My 20 seconds.
20 seconds, emotive comment, and we'll get into that in forthcoming UK column news. Many apologies for the slight technical issues we had at the start of the programme. It's taken up a little bit of time, but we'll pick up on that topic. India and AI is one for us to cover. So, Ben, thank you very much for joining me. It's been an interesting news. And also, Liz Evans, thank you for joining me. Now, we will have a UK column extra in a few moments for all our members. So if you're a full-time or full member of UK column, do join us then. We'll dig further into some of these subjects. Otherwise, huge thank you for our audience, wherever you are in UK or worldwide. Thank you for joining us. UK column news will be back at 1 o'clock on Wednesday. See you then. Bye-bye.